Ukraine's two largest cities, Kyiv and Kharkiv, are still trying to hold off Russian forces as Russia continues its push in the south as well. ABC News contributor Colonel Steve Ganyard, a former Defense and State Department official, has more on the military developments here. Steve, thank you for being here. And Colonel, I want to start with that attempt at a limited ceasefire. The goal was to create humanitarian corridors so that civilians could escape. But Ukraine says that effort has already been halted in Mariupol because Russian forces kept firing. So what do you make of that?
Well, there are two ways to look at this, Diane. You could say that the Russians never intended to have a ceasefire, and they were just looking to get civilians out in the open so they could shoot at them a bit more than they've already done. The other thing is that given the incompetence of the Russian military thus far, perhaps what happened is that there are folks down at the tactical level that just didn't get the word, didn't know they were supposed to stop shooting, which is entirely plausible, but it's also a bit scary as well.
Now, is there a way to look at that as a good thing if they're that disorganized?
I think there is in one way. I mean, this has been something that you and I have talked about all week, is how most military analysts are flabbergasted at how poorly the Russian military has performed. It's a third largest military, at least by numbers and by spending in the world, but that sure doesn't mean that they're the third best given their performance in Ukraine the past couple of weeks.
So let's look at the map of where things stand right now, because as I mentioned, Russian forces are continuing their push in the south along the Black Sea. So what happens if Russia manages to gain full control of those major cities along the southern coast?
Yeah, a couple things to think about. First thing is that I think we should note nothing's happened in the past couple days. The battlefield is amazingly static. I mean, the focus of effort up around Kyiv, not going anywhere. Kharkiv is still standing. The only place, as you note, that they're making some progress is down in the south. But the Ukrainians also didn't put all their forces down there. You know, there's distance, and you use distance in an operational sense where you defend and you pull back, you defend and pull back. For Russian forces to come up from the south all the way to Kyiv is going to be a long, long time, and it's going to be a slog, and they're going to get picked off as they go up. So there's at least one vein of thought that says that what Russia's trying to do is sort of build that southern land bridge across to Transnistria or to Moldova, but at least all the way to Odessa. So there's concern here that what they're trying to do is take all of those southern ports along the Black Sea, or take away all of the access to the Black Sea, because essentially that will allow them to economically strangle Ukraine. But again, that's a long-term prospect, and Putin can't afford to stay in Ukraine much longer given the performance of his military.
Now, Russian forces do seem to be trying to encircle the capital of Kyiv and Ukraine's second largest city of Kharkiv, which has taken a brunt of a lot of the violence here. Now, as you mentioned, they are still, as far as we know, under Ukrainian control. But how long do you think those cities can hold out?
They've held out far longer than I think anybody has anticipated. That's what's amazing. So the ability to hold the moral high ground, to have your fighters, your defenders in Ukraine to say this is our homeland, we're going to defend it with our lives, versus these Russians who apparently some didn't even know they were going into combat. They thought they were going into a drill. It doesn't seem like any of the Russian military has their heart in it, which is not surprising. The Ukrainians will fight to the end. If you looked at what Aaron was talking about and what we've seen in some of our reporting today, you see people getting ready to create a resistance. So if the Ukrainian military gets ground down to the point where they're no longer essentially effective, it's going to be, picking up rifles that are in the closet, and it's going to be individuals going out and attacking the Russians coming in. And that kind of war is what Chechnya turned into for Putin right off the bat, right after he took power. That ground down for 8 years, and it bled the Russians white, and that's what Putin knows he can't afford here.
Now, President Zelensky has repeatedly called for a no-fly zone over Ukraine to fend off Russian air attacks, but the U.S. and NATO allies have repeatedly rejected that. Why is that seemingly off the table?
Well, there are a couple reasons. The practical reasons are that the Russian Air Force, which probably has some of the best kit, some of the best airplanes in the world, is missing in action. It's just another thing that's totally baffling because there should be an excellent Air Force, and they're really nowhere to be seen. They are not a part of what's going on here. Most of what we're seeing in terms of attacks from the air are missile attacks. So we know that the Ukrainians have launched over 500 missiles, but we know that the Russian Air Force is doing some bombing, some attacks, some attack helicopters, but that's not the problem. And that's what a no-fly zone would do. It would prevent airplanes from flying over. But you're not going to have U.S. or NATO aircraft bombing, tanks on the ground or convoys. And this comes back to the other point here. If you put NATO or American forces, as Mr. Putin noted correctly today, over Ukraine, you're going to go head-to-head, and that's going to be a quick exit out of a small fight into a global war.
All right, Colonel Steve Ganyard, always great to have you, Colonel. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.